Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Often Wrong. On this week's episode, we are talking about how siloing issues keeps power consolidated at the top, and that is not where we want it. So we're going to talk about a couple of issues from recent history. We're going to talk about what we can do to take our power back, and join us. Hey, listeners. Thank you so much for joining us again for this episode of Often Wrong. If you are enjoying how this season is rolling out, you can engage further by liking, subscribing, leaving a comment on wherever you listen to your podcast or on our website at carrotimpact.com/oftenwrong. From all of us at Often Wrong, thank you so much, and let's get back into the show. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Often Wrong, where we're digging into the big social issues. We're not being scared to get it wrong. We're doing all the things. We think we're right here, but if you listen to this episode and you disagree, don't forget to leave a comment wherever you're listening to this podcast, or at carrotimpact.com/oftenwrong, and we can add your 2 cents to our What We Got Wrong episode, which is next week. There'll be more. So if you're late, that's okay. We'll reference it later, but just remember to do that.
Yeah.
Today, we're talking about how siloing issues, single issue voters and people, can help keep power consolidated at the top, which is not where we want it to be. So I think that's, this topic's so important for so many different reasons, which is so ironic given what this topic is about. But I feel like, one, people seem super overwhelmed and exhausted by all of the issues going on right now. And I think people are like getting in the weeds about certain issues and arguing over single issues without realizing that all of them affect all of us all the time, whether or not we're like called out by name in the issue title or not.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I'm so excited to talk about this. I think, there's so much here. And your observation that, single issue voters, et cetera, it's not an accident, as we are going to discuss. It's not an accident that we are encouraged to only care about things. Like, if you feel like every cause is fighting separately, like feminism over here, climate change over here, racial justice over here, labor rights, somewhere in the back corner, and it's not an accident. It's, again, because the structures up top, separating it out and not letting us see how everything is interconnected, is the way that they maintain their power.
Yeah.
And I've probably said the phrase siloing issues keeps power consolidated 1,000 times in my life, and it remains truer than ever. So I'm super excited today to talk about, how the people up top keep winning, and how we don't realize that there's no such thing as a single issue, a one-off. It's all part of it. So we're going to do some quick dives into recent examples of this and talk about what we can do to get the power back, and bring it back to the people and bring issues together and see how it's all interconnected, which is really what life's all about.
Hell yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
Power to the people.
Wonderful.
There's
Shall
a
we?
through line here. Yeah.
Shall we get started?
I want to kick this off by talking about intersectional feminism. I think that is like a great place to start this conversation because most people have heard of it. And I'm assuming if you're listening to this podcast, you've heard of it. So this was started by Kimberly Crenshaw. This is a legal scholar, civil rights advocate. This happened in 1989, which is this very special year. It's the year I was born. And it just described how different forms of oppression like race, gender, and class all intersect to create these like very unique experiences of discrimination. And this was a big idea because it's like, if we're talking about feminism, but we're not talking about Black women, it's not going to work. And it's really, I think we'll see in a lot of these topics, or the two topics we're going to talk about today, how it's really like this rising tide lifts all boats kind of situation. And if you're not focusing on the big picture, it's going to take you much longer. And you're probably going to fight with a lot of people along the way. And I don't think that's what we really want. So she introduced this concept, pioneer. I think it really kind of came on the scene.
Love Kimberly Crenshaw. I'm so happy to bring her up.
And I think it's so interesting because even this idea of intersectional feminism, this happened 36 years ago.
Yeah.
And yet I don't think it came into like the public lexicon until kind of recently. And I feel like that maybe was on purpose, that it was kind of not as loud as it should have been
Yeah.
all of
Oh,
these times.
interesting.
Yeah, I think it kind of, I
That's
was thinking about it when we were, when, thinking about this episode today.
yeah. I think that is a phenomenal example of also like an individualized experience of keeping issues siloed. Like,
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of different ways to look at this. If you look at it from a like bird's eye view and you can see how everything is parsed out, separate, etc. But it's intersectional feminism and third wave feminism allows us to focus on the individual and how each lived experience, especially like, race, class, gender, etc., impacts outcomes and lived experiences.
Yeah.
That individual take, like it's at every level. It's here at every level. And I think it's really key to look at that. But I I have been, I mean, I read Kimberly Crenshaw's work 2016 maybe for the first time. I so intersectional feminism to me was like is something that's been getting traction, but it was like it's funny because like first wave feminism, second wave feminism, third wave feminism, and now like the fourth kind of wave that we've been in lately. It's those don't get identified until much later. And so it's an interesting thing to like look back and say, when did this actually come into the lexicon?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're right. It was definitely not in the 90s mainstream, for sure. So yeah.
Well, even that's a thing that now that it is more public, people use the term intersectional a lot more now that people
Mhm.
understand intersectional feminism or know about it. And some activists think that that takes away from the intersectional feminism movement, which is specifically about adding race and class to feminism. But
Yeah.
then other activists think that it's really important. And I think I'm somewhere in between the two because I can see both sides of that, but how
Mm.
the concept of it is kind of critical for all activism and all social justice work, but while also not taking away from this like hard won movement that was started 36 years ago that is just now getting its due. So,
Yeah.
it's kind of a difficult position to be in, but I think just overall, it just helps people recognize that, yeah, justice is not one size fits all. Because I
Yep.
truly have been trying to think about this all day. I can't think of a single example of an issue that's truly single issue. And
Oh, that's a great question. Um, I was about to say getting stung by a bee, but there's so much there.
there's so much there. Yeah, no,
Healthcare,
definitely.
environment. And I think one point that I want to establish early on for this episode is that I'm aware that there's this idea that we need to be perfect activists. We need to have an understanding of every single thing, every single issue. We need to be like the perfect activism is kind of a it's not a separate thing, but and nothing is separate, but it's related. But I would say like the idea of looking at this all together, I would argue from an emergent perspective, seeing how things all fit together and not siloing issues. It's more about understanding the concepts and the underpinnings of each of these things. What's happening? It's not about being an expert or about being the voice of change for 90 different things. Like, if there's one thing that you really, really care about, that's great. Care about that. But look at it in the context of the bigger picture. It's not like you have to talk and address every single thing, but it's so important to, I'll just use the environment for example. Like the environmental issues was always very dear to me as a kid growing up, and it took me a while to go, oh, and it's kind of like, the concept of environmental justice, and which largely started in North Carolina, that movement. Yes, but that should have been the concept all along. We should
Hmm.
have been looking at everything together from an equity and, in fully informed perspective,
Yeah,
but addressing, you know, environment with those in mind and with those like leading how we're relating to other things. So,
totally agreed. And
yeah,
we're going to get more into that later of
yeah,
like how you can use these things today because I think it's not as challenging as maybe it seems. I mean, it might be challenging in some ways, but it's not, no one's asking you to take on every issue all the time. I don't even know if that would be
mhm,
effective at this
yeah,
point.
yeah,
But
definitely.
let's get into some examples. I think this would be fun to really just talk through some things and like unpack a little bit of how this has come into public view over the last several years. I want to start with one that I think most people know about. I think basically everyone knows about it because everyone who watches TV or movies knows about it because for a while we didn't have any TV shows and nothing was renewed on time because of the Hollywood strike in 2023. So this is a big one, even though I think a lot of people know about it. Yeah, there's some other pieces that I think should be explored in this lens of siloing issues. So I think this is like the tale as old as time. You are coming to work, you are trying to get better conditions, better pay for everyone. It's on everyone's mind. And then, your boss might say, like, hey, you're right. You do deserve a raise. You're such a good worker. But these other people, I don't know about that. Puts you in a bad
Yeah.
situation. It's probably happened at your job, and it definitely happened in 2023 at the Hollywood strike. So, this one is with the Writers Guild of America and the Screen Actors Guild, which I will probably refer to as WGA and SAG AFTRA as we go through this conversation. But they were fighting for fair wages, protections against AI, and better working conditions. So, but one of the issues that came up during this was racial pay disparities and diversity in hiring. So those things got separated from the main quote unquote
Mhm.
issues of fair wages and protections, which is so interesting because we saw on the news all the time big, big actors who were on the picket lines. And then it was kind of about them. But actually, it was about really everybody else. And what was interesting there is that separating racial pay disparities and diversity in hiring, you're lifting some people up. So even if you increase the pay and make it work for a lot of actors means generally white, cis, privileged actors. So privileged, this is a very loose term, just
Yeah.
used comparatively,
Yeah.
but it's like you can lift it and still people who are people of color, people of different sexual orientations, gender presentations are not going to have parity still. So that
Yeah.
doesn't make it fair. And then that kind of undermines the point of a union.
Yep.
So this thing, this was after the George Floyd protests, after the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020 and on. And a lot of studios made diversity pledges at that time, but a lot of them got stalled because actually by 2023, Latino actors only made up 5% of speaking roles, and Black actors were getting less opportunities than ever. So it didn't really match what they were saying.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it got some of these actors and writers to an acceptable place, but the people who were systemically and hierarchically, quote unquote, below them still weren't getting there. So we had two actors, Kendrick Sampson and Lahia Villalobos. I'm not sure if I'm saying her name right, but it's a beautiful name. They
Pretty much.
were the two main people who spoke out about this and like warning about if we don't have these intersectional demands in these contract negotiations, these marginalized creators would continue to be left behind. So yeah, it just didn't work. And studios
Yeah.
started using kind of piecemeal bargaining offers to weaken the solidarity of the union, which is terrible. And it's so kind of scary to see how, like, maybe one of the most public strikes in recent US history,
For
they were
sure.
still able to do something like that while the whole world is watching. And so it kind of made it so that you could go to smaller unions, offer better deals, trying to hope that they will like, you know, break the strike and get back to work, which will weaken everybody else's argument. They would target lower paid workers, more vulnerable people like background actors or lower tier writers and give them exclusive offers. And it just helped them get away with not addressing systemic issues at the table. So, yeah, all of this really led to kind of a shit show. And I think it's something that is still, I think it's like reverberating through right now. There's been such a big shakeup in Hollywood over the past couple of years. And I think it would be foolish to not think that this played a major role in weakening the ways that people have been adhering to traditional Hollywood structures. And yeah, so yeah, in front of the world, you are isolating your workers, you're preventing a unified front, you're prolonging a struggle, and you are kind of refusing an equitable solution. And for
Yep.
what? It's kind of silly to think that it's like, I think sometimes arguments about strikes or about, marginalized workers can fall on deaf ears because it's like, oh, well, you already work in Hollywood. It's not really that big of a deal. Or like, stop making this about racism. And those points are silly, first of all. But also, it's just you. I don't think the reason that they're doing this is because they really dislike people of color and don't want them to be paid. I think it's just this divide and conquer playbook.
Yes, 100%.
It's really that at the end of the day.
And I do wonder, like, even if we were to zoom out and go, okay, well, what's causing them to want to, like, because even if they were to see, oh, this is better in the long run, because it is economically, all of it, it's way better in the long run to lift everybody up together
Mm-hmm.
and make sure that people aren't being left behind. It's better for it strengthens the entire community, the
Yeah.
group. It's You can't keep having these like pitfalls and then it's like, oh, oops, slipped through the cracks. Whoops. These moments, I mean, pay disparities on the basis of gender and then on the basis of gender sectioned by race has, been, I think, pretty widely understood now. It was, what was the statistic? White women make 75 cents on the dollar for every man. And I think that's still white men, but I'm
Yeah.
actually not sure.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, but then black women, it was like 40 some odd cent. I'm gonna totally misquote. And
Yeah.
but it's all, different. And uh I think it's, yeah, I agree with you. It's not because they hate people of color.
That
It's
would be too
because
easy.
that would be too easy. It's because, and that's what I think people, this is kind of a sidebar, but I think that's what people misunderstand about racism. It's not just about hate. It's
Yeah.
really not.
It's about
Like,
power.
it's about power. It's literally about power. And any way they can separate us and make us like fragmented, bifurcated, they will, and they will take their power and take
Hmm.
our power. And so it's just another tool in their toolkit, you
It's
know?
just like in reverse, and this is specifically a
Yep.
Hollywood example. You have all these films that win Academy Awards, and they're about slavery. Do you think descendants of slavery got any benefits from that movie coming out? Did society improve? You would think they made this film because they care and they really want this story to be told. And maybe someone in that room did. But the people who made the money and got the accolades were not them. It was the people at the top. So it's kind of like the inverse of that, where it's like, oh no, you must care. And it's like, oh no, they hate you. No, it really is about how we can keep power centralized at the top. Because it is a lovely idea to think that, like, oh yeah, we'll unify the industry and raise the whole thing up. That
Yeah.
sounds great. Does it sound better than making $1 billion?
Yep.
To some people, no. So.
Yep. Yep. Oh, 100%. Yeah,
So
man.
that's why I think about how they keep getting away with it. And also, it's like thinking about everyday work. How do you see this showing up? Just so we can like draw this example down. Because I'm thinking about the DEI backlash that we're seeing right now, where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, well, that's not fair. Everyone should have an equal opportunity at a job. I'm like, that was the point. It wasn't about Black people. It could
Yep.
have been, DEI could have been used for a white man going for a job who came
Yeah.
from a different background than another one. This
Yeah.
was for everyone. So it's now we have people cutting off their nose despite their face because about
Yep.
other people getting special treatment. But that's
Yeah.
not what it was.
Oh man.
It's
This
just
is
like same thing with like welfare, where it's like white people use welfare more than anyone else, and
yes.
it's like,
Like
yeah,
it's not about God, I think I'm going to keep coming back to this. It's not about hatred. It's not
yeah,
about, and look, sometimes it's about engendering hatred to get what you want. We see hatred being weaponized by people at the top for sure. And
certainly,
it's the people who that's like invoked with is like you're pawns, you're being manipulated. And, that's rough. For everyone involved. That's,
yeah,
that's, that's
for
tough.
real.
But I I think that's a great example. Yeah, I think that's a great example. And you know, welfare especially. Yeah, it's just one of those things. If you keep everything apart, no one's going to talk to each other. No one's going to understand, you know, what actually needs to change. And they also like fail to look at, oh, okay, so welfare might be the answer right now, but like let's talk about this is one of my favorite examples. I, like very much so. Crime statistics. And this is not
Mm,
my topic, but crime statistics. How do we lower crime statistics? Do you know the answer, Lisa?
no,
It's education. Investing in education. That's how
yeah,
we lower crime. And oops, police brutality is involved in that as well. How
yeah,
funny that we have so many layers of things. Everything for me roots back to education, which again is also very layered, but we continue to just silo these issues and it's benefiting only a few people. It's not even like all the people at the top. It's not
yeah,
even the government. It's like a few key people at the top of these industries
yeah.
oftentimes.
Who are now
And
maybe part of the government.
yeah, that yes. Yes. Um that is correct. That good point. I forget. But it's a very real problem that we're seeing everywhere. And
Yeah.
again, this is kind of one of those things, it's no one person's fault. This is just how things started to happen. And oh, I'm gonna go on a lot of tangents. You should stop me now and
Okay,
finish
let's
and
go to
make
your
your point.
topic because we have more time for tangents later when we can connect some
Yeah.
dots because I got
Yeah.
some dots to connect.
Okay, great. Well, now I want to talk about crime and education. Oh
Hold
God.
it, save it.
Um, I gotta hold it. I gotta save it. Um, Emergence and siloing. I gotta save more of that. And yeah, just how things shook out here. But I think so. Healthcare is what I want to talk about today,
Mm,
and this is a simple. I'm going to keep this like fairly high level because the granular levels of healthcare are extremely upsetting and very difficult to talk through in a short period of time.
mm,
But like, let's say at a larger level, I think your example was great. You gave like a very practical application. Let's talk about like if I'm thinking about healthcare and I'm thinking about insurance companies or hospitals, and who is taking the most resources and where we can expect the most resources taken. Obviously, okay, you can draw a healthcare to poverty pretty quickly. Like that's sure, great. Uh, economic disparities. Yeah, you're going to have a lot more healthcare issues. Well, okay, then we got to look at okay, so the low income status, what comes with that? And a lot of times low income folks are by far at the most risk of environmental disasters, of other healthcare disorders because of, um, food apartheid, redlining,
yeah,
um, all of these other things that impact and that take effect because of the low income status. Now,
and
again,
pollution,
and
lack of
pollution,
trees,
exactly.
everything.
Pollution, these communities also have a propensity to be largely people of color. So it's low income communities of color who are at the most risk for environmental, it's cancer clusters, chemicals, it's, I mean, so many things that disproportionately affect these communities. So when we're looking at the healthcare system at large and who it's working for, which is arguably no one, I would say failing to look at all the ways that these things intersect. Let's pull back in education. Understanding how to eat to nourish your body, not just like the, you know, oh, 8 servings of veggies a day, because that's not realistic for, I mean, I'm a vegetarian. It's not realistic for me. 8 servings. I don't even know what the fuck that means. But, it's there are coordinated efforts to keep people drinking soda, to keep people buying sugar, to keep people, entrenched in what they think is healthy or what's just accessible, what food
Mhm.
stamps are covering, what is working. I mean, food
Or
stamps,
the corner store
formula.
honey bun epidemic, which
Yes.
I've
Hmm.
fallen victim to in the past.
Yes. I I also think there's a lot to talk about with the formula piece. I don't think I'm the person to talk about it, but like what food stamps again cover and certain things there, that's huge. And then we realize, oh, a lot of these things, oops, they have talc in them, and there are huge cancer clusters of babies now because of the baby powder and what happened there. Oops. Um, Again, it's all connected and it's all so interwoven that keeping it apart is really only benefiting the people at the very top of healthcare who it's also it's messed up because it's like the for-profit hospitals, they're benefiting. Um, Pharmaceutical companies are benefiting. I'm not even entirely sure how insurance companies are benefiting because they should have a vested interest in making us all healthier, but they don't. They instead, you know, help keep us sick and make prices go up more, and it's a mess. But it's mostly, I would argue, the pharmaceutical industry that really benefits from a lot of this, separation, because
It
once you
has
have
to be
heart
health
disease,
insurance, though.
yeah, it has to be, right, at some level. I'm just not sure the
There's like,
economics.
okay, this is a
Yeah.
brief example I have from last year. I was so sick for like a year or two. I had so many health problems. I
Yes.
gained like 100 pounds for no reason. Nothing
Yep.
changed. And I went to like 50 doctors, and all of them were just like, you just need to lose weight. And I was like, no, the problem is that I gained weight. What's the problem? And they're like, well,
Yeah.
the problem is that you gained weight. I'm like, we're going in circles. We're not getting
That's
anywhere.
not the problem, honey.
And I
No.
got my blood tested and they were like, you're pre-diabetic. And I was like, okay, I need to get these types of medications so that I can bring it down. My mom has diabetes. I don't want to have that. This is like
Yeah.
kind of irreversible and lifelong, and I don't want to do that. And they were
Mhm.
like, oh no, we can't approve you for any of these until you have diabetes. And I was like, why would you do that? Like,
Yeah.
that means I
Aren't we
have to be on
trying to
medicine for the rest of my life.
prevent me from being on diabetes, like from
Right. Like
having
you're going to
diabetes?
have to pay, but you're not paying. It's they need you to keep relying on it forever. And then they could be like, oh, now you're high risk and now everything else is more expensive. It's like
Yep.
in their best interest.
Yep.
So that shit pisses me
Yep.
off every time I think about it, even though I've finally found a good doctor and I've made so many strides. But it's still, when I think about it, it makes my
Yeah.
blood boil.
Oh, totally. Well, yeah, and any kind of like prophylactic care that is, you know, well intentioned, they're like, you're not sick yet. And you're like,
Yeah,
but I'm trying to
almost.
prevent, I'm almost sick. No, be sicker. You
No,
have to
yeah.
be sicker in order to do anything. It's just, yeah. And, the other thing that I'm thinking about is how siloing healthcare from especially other justice movements, and let's bring back in, trans folks, queer rights, gender. I mean, good God, there is so much to talk about, like the the
No, that's the
disparity in
struggle. Trying to
healthcare
be
with.
concise here when everything is.
See, this is my issue about healthcare. Like I wanted to
Yeah.
talk about healthcare, but I can't go into too much detail because it will
Everything's
be all the
implicated here.
detail, and
Yeah.
I'll give my senior thesis. Like
Mhm.
everything's implicated in healthcare. Like, yeah, gender issues, again, like women health. It's nuts. So
Oh yeah, that's actually the final piece of my story is that the thing that
oh
was wrong with me was that I had PCOS. And I think
yeah,
most
oh
people
yeah.
do. And a lot of times PCOS can be caused by the foods you're eating. So
Mhm.
that's another way that all these and misogyny, which we
Yep.
always end up coming back to.
And if I might use PCOS for a second, it also can cause infertility. And then,
Yes,
oops, you have to go do tens of thousands of dollars worth of IVF trying to get pregnant.
exactly.
Oh no, that's
Crazy.
benefiting a lot of people other than you.
That's so
Wow.
wild.
Yep, it's kind of crazy. And, it's, we're allowing healthcare leaders and policymakers to remain unaccountable by separating out these issues. I
Yeah,
think, the system is designed for us to keep like fighting over scraps and not understand. They're not letting us see the full picture. I don't know why
yeah,
I'm envisioning like a cake. But
yeah,
we're
kind of.
instead like just kind of clawing at the baselines and trying to catch up. And it's impossible to do. And I would say, it's really a shame, and it leaves us more vulnerable too to folks on all sides to start to attack people. And when I say all sides, I mean the elite, the right, the left, the whomever. Um, Not really the marginalized folk. They're not usually perpetuating this kind of narrative that I'm talking about, but
Yeah.
they
I
they
feel like
use
this is the side that usually gets ignored where it's like, oh, don't bring up your conspiracy theories. And you're like,
yeah.
no, conspiracies are real. And this
Mhm.
literally is one. So come on.
Yeah, yeah, yep. And it's this is what enables people to then use healthcare, because if we had a better picture and a better understanding of how all of these things were interconnected, it would be stronger. We would have
Yeah,
a stronger understanding of it. It wouldn't be as corruptible, but instead, it's a wedge issue inserted wherever as convenient to stoke rage about anything, because people
totally.
are already fucking mad about healthcare. And then they're like, oh my God, you know what? They're giving foreign prisoners trans surgery, which I remember was one of Donald Trump's campaign ads. I was
I
watching
remember
football. Do you
that.
remember that? I saw that and I was
I was
like,
like, what the fuck
how
is
is this on
that?
television? They gave some like
They just say
someone
whatever now.
recaptured gender affirming. I was like, whoa, 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 just that's also okay. Stop. Like, stop, please stop. But that's what it allows us to. It allows the whole system. It's just like, whoops, oops. We have no
Okay.
baseline. We
Yeah. No,
we
for
have no
real.
culture.
It's
Oops.
so, I mean, it just, when you think about like, I think that healthcare is such a good example that we could do literally a whole
Yes.
season on just like
Yes. Just
unpacking the
healthcare.
details of healthcare.
Yeah. Seriously.
But I just think this whole idea of getting siloed, it's such an easy trap for us all to fall into.
Totally.
And yeah, like, okay, so even you and I, we think about this a lot. We've talked about it a lot. It comes up in all of our work.
Yep.
But even I remember in an earlier episode that we did, I forget which one it was, but you were saying something about like, oh yeah, if you're overwhelmed, just focus on one lane in social justice activism. You won't get burned out, which makes a ton of sense from a
Did
mental
I
health
say that?
perspective. Yes. And
Oh.
but it does make a ton of sense from this like mental health perspective, like
Yeah.
preserve yourself. But also it might just be another easy trap to fall into where it's like, oh
Yeah.
well, I can only take on so much. And maybe it is still true. It's like the middle of like, you can pick one issue, but make sure you're challenging yourself to understand all of the other
All the
things that it
implications.
impacts.
Yeah. Well, and maybe honestly, it's a better way to not burn out, to care about all of the things, but and I'm not talking about caring, like, because I think most reasonable people care about suffering.
Hmm.
Um and this is, we're just talking about different types of suffering at this point,
Yeah.
but I would say, yeah, I don't know, it's interesting. I think that everyone's different, and I also just, we can't talk about this without talking about how terrible social media has been in a lot of ways for all of this stuff. Like,
No, it's set up for that. Actually,
it's set
all of
up
them
for this.
except for
Yes.
TikTok were like this. And
Yeah.
I think I used to always make this point when people would be like, "Oh, I hate TikTok." And I'm like, "No, it's the best one because it's the only one that used to have the algorithm set up that the comments that
Yeah.
you would agree with would appear at the top. And now that's not true anymore. And now when you open TikTok, since it was like shut down and came back repurchased by we know who, they
Right.
you'll get I open up any video and I used to open them and I'd be like stuff that I thought was funny or stuff that I agreed with and you could like build with people on like
Yeah.
ideas and
Yeah.
instead now it's immediate fighting every single comment section and it's like
Oh, that's so
oh not you
sad.
two
That's meta now.
because
That's
yeah
like,
Meta does it on purpose. They want you
yep,
to rage, they want you to fight for
yep,
engagement and use of the app and like
yep.
God knows what else they're doing it
Oh,
for but
man.
those reasons for sure.
Yeah.
So I think that's
Yeah.
like one way. I was just going to ask like the ways that we think this is getting reinforced so it becomes such a part of like kind of almost like our DNA and how we
Yeah.
respond to things. And I think social media is a really good one.
Yeah. And media generally too. Like,
Media
I,
period.
yeah, media period. I would say, th- I'll come in with my take on the 24-hour news cycle,
Mm,
which has ruined journalism in many ways.
yeah.
There have been a lot of existential threats to journalism, but and the kind of like journalism that I love is like magazine articles. I like digesting really long pieces. I might not be
Hmm.
able to tell you all the headlines today, and that's perfectly fine, but I
Yeah.
can talk to you
Like the
for a long
best.
time, like on this podcast about random shit. And I feel I have a good grasp of understanding about the world.
Yeah.
And but the media really thrives on these like digestible stories. They're going for clickbait. They're going for, everyone's fighting for advertising dollars, which means you're fighting for eyeballs, which means you're fighting for clicks. And you are going to focus on whatever brings that and whatever fuels your audience. And so it's just impossible to cover something from all the bases all the time when you're just trying to get even like, and I understand this. I'm not criticizing journalists on this. It's
I
hard
am.
to tell a single story about an instance in healthcare
Hmm.
and not, if you're able to connect it to everything, great. You might not be able to. It's hard, but I think I'm not talking about the individual stories that gets produced. I think my argument is like how they're getting produced and released out into the world and the bias of like coverage and headlines and all of that. I think,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah, because I remember, I mean, being in journalism school when I first started college, how it used to be such this like respected institution of like, it needs to be unbiased. You need to make sure you're showing all sides, you're doing all these different things. And that devolved so quickly. And
mhm,
now, and I think obviously that has a lot to do with like, the institutions that people are writing for and, not being, that's not what you're being asked to write.
yeah,
So I think it's like it's a small thing, like in article by article, but it's also a much bigger thing that maybe, it's not,
yeah,
you're implicated, but it might not be your fault as a
right,
journalist.
right,
But I just think it's like, it's exactly what you're saying. If like you're trying to get these clicks, you know what gets clicks? Rage bait. And I've
hmm,
actually gotten a lot better now at being on social media and being like, and I'm like, rage bait, ignore, scroll, don't say
yeah,
anything, don't look at it,
yep,
don't even engage with it. You don't want to see more of this. And I think it also just like encourages this polarization to the point that now we have things like when we were kids, Fox News was not what it is now. Now we
no,
have fully divisive whole channels that only show one side, which I
it's
want to
crazy,
mention in a little bit because I think that has come up in a major way in the last six
yeah,
months.
yeah,
But yeah, there's that one. Then there's also just generally this idea. This is just something that I'm thinking about this like sense of like fight or flight, where you
mhm,
feel like you need to rage. You need to be so mad about this thing that's impacting you specifically, or else like it's going to be taken away from you, or, and it's like,
yeah,
I think actually is exactly what I was just thinking about. I'm talking about the different news channels. This year on election night, I was sitting on my couch and I was like, you know what? I'm going to flip between all of the news channels and see what
Yep.
they're saying about the
I've done
election.
exactly this. I think this was a homework assignment when I was studying journalism.
Oh, really? Yeah,
Hmm.
I just like did it last year because I was like, well, I don't trust any of these channels. So I'm just going to watch all of them, including
Yeah.
Fox News. I wanted to see what they're saying.
Yeah.
First of all, Fox News predicted that Trump was winning from the beginning, and it
They
was
were
like a
correct.
landslide. And then on the other channels, it was like, oh, we don't know, it's even. And I was like, well, this is weird. But
Yeah.
also, one thing I noticed in the 24-hour news cycle of all of these channels, they were all saying the same thing to different people. They were all saying on CNN and also on Fox News, this is the most important election of your life. The other side, whether it was left or right, is going to take everything from you. This is your livelihood. You need to fight back. You need to vote. This is our last chance. If you don't vote in this election, it was like panicking everyone, but they're saying the same thing to everyone. And I was like, oh, I like galaxy brain moment where I was like, oh, I see
Oh
what's
my
happening.
God.
And it's why we can't have a
Wow.
conversation because we're being told the same thing, but in like different fonts. And we can't
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and it's like not even an argument because we all fully would believe that this is an attack on our selfhood going forward from
Oh
the other
God.
side. So
Yeah.
yeah, I just feel
Right.
like everyone feels like it's urgent to freak out and protect themselves
Yep.
without realizing that you need to
Yep.
protect all of us to protect any of us.
You know, I will say that the polarization, which is not a, I'm going to say this like six times, not a separate issue than what we're talking about today, siloing. But you know, we're gonna definitely talk more about binaries and polarization and the two party system and all of that in later episodes.
Yeah.
But I would say, you know, we see any kind of separation weakening us, and not any kind of separation, distinct like siloing that is really weakening us as a society, and
Mm,
it's making us vulnerable to things like this.
yeah.
So again, when you don't understand how everything connects and how you connect to all of it and how your community connects to all of it, you are at a massive disadvantage. This is what led to Russia being able to manipulate the outcomes of earlier elections and have people who were so susceptible to this misinformation that was being spread like wildfire by bots, which is crazy. Like we didn't have that before, but people, our society had been weakened, and that
Yeah.
that to me is like the biggest threat to our national security,
Absolutely.
more than
Always.
anything. Always. And it's, I mean, we're doing a great job of crumbling in on top of ourselves, like.
Hmm.
And again, I don't blame the individual, and I'm, you know, I think the
And
falsehood
you
of
shouldn't.
individual responsibility is also woven in here a lot, but
Yeah.
you shouldn't, we shouldn't blame other individuals, but like
That's
we're
why
being
I
set up
always,
to fail.
yeah, literally. And honestly, now when I ever am talking to someone who maybe I don't agree with politically, it's not about arguing about topics or issues with them. It's more about just reminding everyone, like, hey, we don't like this
Yeah.
together, right? We like it
Yep.
for we don't like it for different reasons, but we're together on that, right? Like
Yeah.
that is the most important piece. And to
A
me,
hundred
and I feel like
percent.
it gets so much further. And I think, okay, so there's one more piece that we've mentioned on this podcast before, but I don't think we really got into it. But I think this is another thing that helps us fall into the traps, and that's
Yeah.
the shock and awe effect.
Mm.
And I think that is something that I think a lot of people don't know about. Maybe they're learning about it now, but it's basically what's happening at every moment in 2025,
Yeah.
where it's like there's just a deluge of information, bad policy, horrible takes, Nazi salutes, like everything on your TV screen. And it's like, what do I do? Everything's crumbling down. I'm panicked. And like,
Yeah.
it is this thing that just, I think, one, dysregulates people and makes people
Totally.
feel like they need to rush into action and start attacking because everything is being attacked from all sides.
Yep. Yep.
And yeah, I think there's like, I mean, another example is like 2003 Iraq invasion. This is the first time I saw it as a child. I remember every day after 9/11, I would come home from school and I used to watch Oprah all the time because my grandmother did and I wanted to do that. And then after 9/11, for like months, Oprah wasn't on. And I was like, what the hell am I supposed to do after school? I can't watch any more of this coverage. I am just a child. I wanted to
Yeah.
see people get gifts.
Yeah.
But it's like that, where it's just you're constantly being fed bad news and
Yeah.
you can't take care of yourself properly or your neighbors or your community. And I feel like the divisions have only gone up a mountain in a
Yeah.
graph since then.
And it's easy to get miss the bigger picture and see
Hmm.
how everything's affecting everything else when you're like, where did this come from? We're getting dumped on by all this information, or, we're talking. I think there are a few different ways that shock and awe can work. Or the like idea behind shock and awe, because I think what you're saying with the 2003 Iraq invasion, it was not it was not like we were getting like what we're getting now, shock and awe, is so many executive orders about so many different things. It's
Hmm.
impossible to connect them all. And I'm sure there are some social scholars and journalists who are laboring day in and day out trying to build the bigger picture of it. And, like, I don't even think you can say, oh, the bigger picture was articulated, Project 2025, blah, blah, blah. I don't think you can say that. I think it's like it's we dropped a little bomb over here, and then we dropped another little bomb over here, and then we dropped, three little ones in a row, but they're all separate. Like, where are you going to attend to first? You can't.
Right.
It's keeping you separated from others trying to do the same thing, and you don't realize that the bombs all came from the same place and are mutually having an impact. I'm losing this metaphor
No, I'm
faster by the
following.
second, but I no, it's really collapsing in on itself. But but I would say it's such a powerful tool
Yeah.
of, people who retain power to just, oh, look at the deluge of things that I'm like, good luck, focus on one, maybe,
For
you
real.
know?
Honestly, if you take something from this episode, definitely look up shock and awe. There's books about it, there's articles about it. This is a very dead
Very
serious
real.
thing that has been going
Yep.
on for a long time, but is in effect majorly right
Yeah.
now. And I think it'll make you feel better because also, yeah, some of these bombs, quote unquote, that are being dropped on us aren't even real. Like
Yep.
things are being said that, oh, yeah, we're going to pass this law. You can't legally do that. So it's just like stuff to make you freak out. And that's it. Well, I was going to say one thing that makes me feel better about this, because I think next we're going to talk about like how we get out of this and how we win in
Yeah.
this thing so we can stop pushing power to the top by siloing, letting ourselves be siloed. One piece of good news I saw on last check, someone posted a video on TikTok about people in Barcelona fighting with like attacking tourists in
Taurus.
Barcelona
Hmm.
and saying like you are the source of all of our problems, like foreigners need to get out of here, British people need
Yeah.
to leave. And I commented on that video and I said attacking other people instead of your government is always the wrong answer. And at my last check it had 20,000 likes.
Oh my God, Lisa. I
So,
love that.
and that was, yes, I posted it yesterday. So I'm like, oh, this is gives me hope that at
Dude, you
least
didn't tell me that?
20,000 people agree that like this is us versus them. This is not us versus each other. It can't be. It's not
Yeah,
going to work.
for sure. Oh my God, that is so so true.
Made me
Oh my
happy.
God, I can't believe you little like viral queen over
Only my
here.
comments.
Good for you. Only the comments, but that's what counts. That's basically what this podcast is. It's just our
Literally,
commentary.
only the comments.
Oh my God,
But
that's so funny.
yeah.
Yeah, I think, the how we win piece, if I may get a little esoteric for a moment. I am a big believer in understanding and it helps me personally. It might not help everybody, but in understanding the way this started to happen to begin with and why we got here, um, and how we can move forward with other grounding principles. So I'm always looking to be grounded. I am always looking to, feel connected. And that to me is my antidote to a lot of things. But I very much see, you know, the perspective of these silos. Um, I feel like I've referenced him before, but the first time I got really interested in thinking about all of this was actually reading um, uh, Mark Bittman's book about the history of humankind through food. And it's an excellent, excellent book. It's the name of it is escaping me at this moment, but I consumed that rabidly. And it was so clear to me in how our food system was set up, all the different ways things were siloed there, literally. Like, you know, and again, the food system is a great example because it also ties into healthcare, just given the sheer volume of antibiotics that are given to animals involved in our food system. But how the industrialization of our food system worked was that each thing was fragmented and segmented and then siloed in a way that, okay, it was no longer, you have the cows and the bulls living together, and you get they have babies, you get the milk from the moms, the bulls, you know inseminate, sorry, the the females, and then you get meat from them. Great. Or you get meat from other cows. Nope. Dairy cattle and meat cattle are completely separate. Um, they're separate from leather. Like there's a whole lot of like nothing fits together anymore. And there are a lot of principles of like genuine, like the buzzy name is regenerative agriculture, but this is the way that agriculture has been practiced in, I mean, everywhere else, and indigenous folks everywhere, and particularly people on the African continent have practiced this for thousands and thousands of years, that it's symbiotic, it's regenerative in nature. You have, okay, we're going to grow these things over here, we're going to grow these things here, instead of this monocropping. Oh, let's grow a shit ton of soy, corn, wheat, etc., and it's all going to be separate. So I think this is a great example. And now we have a corn industry. We literally have a corn industry. That's crazy. We have, which is not apart from the sugar industry, but like, because it's all high fructose corn syrup, but we literally have a corn industry. And that is a great example, I think, of how we've lost emergence. And when I talk about emergence, and shout out Adrienne Marie Brown, who we love, um, and has written a lot extensively on emergent strategy, it's really about seeing how everything fits together. And without that approach, and in our work, even our, uh, consulting work, we make it a point to not silo our issues. We don't,
Totally.
lead with, we're experts on gender, being gay, you being black. Like what else do we have? We have like, a few things. I know niche environmental issues. We don't do that anymore. It's not helpful to us.
And also,
Instead,
the
we
fights for all issues inform the other ones. They all
exactly,
go together.
exactly,
So even if this
exactly.
movement hasn't gotten that far, let's take a look at this other one and see where it can
Yes,
go. So I think
exactly.
that's a huge thing that people can apply to their own lives, because
Yep.
honestly, the way this looks, this playbook is always exactly the same. If the worst thing that could ever happen for people in positions of power is for people to realize the power that they have together.
Yes.
And I think that's just so interesting. I feel like normally, yeah, I feel like there's so many movements where this has come up. Like, for example, during Black Lives Matter, I was posting a lot about Palestine because I know
Yeah.
that those two things go together because of Angela Davis.
Yeah.
But then it's like coming around this time where it's like we're focusing on this issue, but it's like we're touching so many different things. All of these things
Yeah.
go together. I could expand on this for so long. Um, but we're reaching our limit, so I won't. But then
Yeah.
there's like labor and environmental justice, how in Movement for Black Lives, they were talking about racial justice, climate, labor, disability, economic justice. Like all of these things are important, and how recognizing that we're being pitted together when we need to work together, that's the most important work that we can do, is
Mm,
making sure that that's not happening. And
yeah.
not, not giving it permission to go forward, because
Yeah.
if we can distribute it, and honestly, we talked about this in the gay episode last week about how we should not be doing hierarchies of like, or, oppression Olympics within the community, because
Right.
it doesn't serve us as a community. And I think that really plays out across every community of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And to bring that back to what you said earlier, focusing on bringing up the other folks who are maybe, in a different subsection of your community, like you were talking about with the Hollywood group, that's not oppression Olympics. That's not saying, oh my God, I'm gay and a writer and a woman. Like I'm fucked every way, like I need blah blah blah. It's not about, because that oppression Olympics is about pity. That's an attention. It's not actually about
Or
solutions.
sometimes about power.
Yeah.
So I
Or
think
sometimes
that's
about power. Amen.
interesting.
Yes, it is. I think that's a very, very good point. But it's about strengthening the community at large. And until we understand that strengthening the community means strengthening its most in need members first, like, when we were talking about the revolution episode and you mentioned the I think it was Claudia who said poor people to the front or something. I don't
Yes.
remember. Yeah, something like that.
For the benefit of all, the poor first.
The poor first. Thank you. Poor people to the front is my take on that. Scholarly. But that's huge.
Yeah.
And I think this is the time to understand how we can bring intersectionality and emergence into our own approach to things, our own conversations, our work, what that looks like. Um, yeah, what do you
Totally.
think there?
I totally agree. I think that's like the biggest thing we can do is keep having these conversations and keep
Yeah,
interrogating like who is benefiting from this issue being siloed and
yeah,
separate? Who is
totally.
benefiting by this being just an issue that affects disabled people, as if that's not a term that
Right.
encompasses a ton of people. Like think all of the terms are like that. You can be gay and you can be anything. You can be disabled and also be a million other things. You can be a woman and a million other things. There's just so many ways for this to go, and to continue pushing back on yourself and on your loved ones to make sure that
Yeah,
we're like widening the scope for all of the issues, I think is a great place to start. And also
yeah.
a plug for independent media and independent
Mm.
journalists, because a
Yep.
lot of that work goes unfunded, but it's critical and we need it back,
Yeah.
because I
Yep.
think we are kind of not supporting, we are
Sure.
supporting like these own traps that we're falling into that are just doing a
Yeah.
disservice to ourselves and everyone else around us.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's honestly, it's miserable being in this place where everything is siloed and we're talking ad nauseum about one thing. And it's like we haven't, I can tell if we're talking that much about one thing, you don't understand how it fits in the broader picture. And it feels very disempowering to look at things in a siloed way. Yes, it also, I mean, to me, it can feel, it's not disempowering. It can feel overwhelming to be like, oh my God,
No, I
it's
think it
all
is
everything.
disempowering
But
because
yeah. I mean,
also
no,
it's like,
I think, let me be clear. It's disempowering to look at things siloed. It is not
mhm,
disempowering to look at things from an emergent perspective, from a,
totally.
holistic perspective.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
What were you
also
going to
it's
say?
like it's just such a thing that, it is disempowering in so many ways by having the issue be siloed, but you're
Hmm.
also removing power from yourself by
Yeah.
thinking that it's just about you and the harm is only to you.
Yep.
So it's like you are building power, you're getting power back by
Yep.
remembering that all of these people are in the same boat with you, even
Hmm.
if, we're getting splashed differently at different times, which
Yeah.
is a really cute metaphor.
Yeah. That's really cute. Water park. That's so cute. Yeah. I think it's a great time to, you know, talk about talk about this and I'm happy we were able to discuss, how siloing issues consolidates the power at the top. And I think
Definitely.
unsticking ourselves is going to be a long journey, but we want to give power back to the people. We need to recognize the patterns, which is again, so much of the antidotes to these. We look at, um, uh, you know, environmental properties, and emergence is inherently anti-capitalistic. It's inherently very connected, and that's really ecology principles. And ecology is really indigeneity, and there's so much here. There's so much here that's just refreshing, grounded, connected, embodied ways of looking at things
Totally.
that I hope people take a second to ask themselves how they can bring that into their perspectives more.
I absolutely agree. Also, I feel like I'm just really loving, I kind of know this, but I think it's just fun to notice in this pod how every episode it kind of is always coming back to this of how to give power back to ourselves. So I hope you're getting that connection and
Yeah.
I hope that it keeps coming up in every topic that we do.
Yeah.
So,
I would also say it keeps coming up that everything is connected.
yeah, literally, it all goes together.
It all goes
And
together.
we'll just hammer that home in different ways till the end of the season.
Yep. Till the end of forever. If
Yeah,
I
literally.
if if no one is saying everything's connected, I'm dead.
Literally.
So,
If you're
yeah.
talking about social justice, you're talking about everybody. So,
Yeah. Yep. Amen. Amen.
all right.
Wow.
Well,
I think that was
yeah,
great. Let us know
today,
if we missed anything, or if you want to
yeah,
correct anything that we've said, or yell at us, or
add
remind us of things.
something. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have
Yeah.
another
You
good
can do
point
that
to
in the
make,
comments, whatever platform you're listening on, Spotify, YouTube, etc. I don't know if you can comment on Apple. I
maybe.
don't go on Apple. Um, limited scope. But
We
thank
also have our
you for listening.
Instagram at
Our
often
Instagram.
wrong pod or at carrotimpact.com/slash often wrong.
And don't we
Also,
have a
next,
TikTok?
yes, yes, but I'll remind you what it is later because I don't remember because we didn't post on it yet.
Okay. Oops.
But yeah, next week's episode is the What We Got Wrong episode. So let us know what you think before we hit record next week.
Yeah.
And even if you miss it, say it anyway, because we have What We Got Wrong episode every 5 episodes. So
Yeah.
we can circle back at any time. Um, yeah, the conversations are all ongoing. We have not
Yep.
closed the lid on any of these topics, just open them. And I hope you enjoy
Yep.
them. So thanks for
Yeah.
listening
Thanks
and
for
talk to you
listening.
soon.
Talk soon. Bye.
Bye.
Often Wrong is produced by Lisa Nwankwo, Claire Cornetta, and Joe Abdella. This episode was shot and edited by Joe Abdella. Special thanks to Michael Drummonds. Often Wrong is a Carrot Impact podcast. Go to carrotimpact.com/oftenwrong to learn more.